this one burns a little bit of oil. You got that camera going right
Yep.
now?
All right, we got a very special episode today. We have my cousin Jim with us, and he's going to go over some of the different tractors he's owned over the years. And towards the end of the video, we're going to actually showcase some of his current collection.
All right, yeah, so I'm Casey's older cousin. I would like to think that maybe I'm the person that kind of got him into this hobby because I'm like 9 years older than him, and I think he always admired me because I was his favorite cousin. But all jokes aside though, no, I was into the contractor thing probably since I was, I'd say about 10 or 11. My father had a little Huffy 5 horsepower lawnmower, probably built in like the late 60s, early 70s. It sat in the back of his barn for years. I actually pulled it out when I was about 11 years old. He's like, well, if you can get it running, you can have it. So that's all he had to say. And I ended up getting it running and driving and mowing. So that was the beginning of the tractor bug for me. Then I kind of started looking at God tractor pulling, and I thought that to be a pretty, looked like a pretty fun sport. But of course, I was only young. I was probably about 14 at the time. I didn't have a lot of money, and I was going up against some stiff competition. I mean, these guys are pouring thousands and thousands of dollars into these tractors, and this was probably back in the late 80s, so I just didn't have that kind of funding, but it still definitely got me into the hobby. So my first real garden tractor, I think, was a Boland's. It was a 1968 Boland's 1050 Husky. That was powered by a 10 horsepower Wisconsin. Also, I think they also call those tube frame tractors. They had a 3-speed high-low transmission, very heavy-duty garden tractor. So that was a pretty stout machine. Then my second one was a Wheelhorse Model 502. I ended up taking that tractor. I still have it to this day. It's basically a 702 now. I ended up getting another one, kind of putting the two together and making one decent garden tractor out of it. So those are the two that got me into it. Then it snowballed from there. Once I got those two and had them running, and I just kind of went haywire, you know, right through my early 20s, 30s, 40s. I definitely scaled back a lot. I've only probably got maybe maybe six altogether now. 2 of them are project machines. I got 2 4-wheel tractors that are running. Maybe 7, because I got 3 walk behind Simplicities. I actually have an old Gravely back there, another project as well. So yeah, I definitely scaled back because I had a lot of machines over the years, all various brands. The only one I think I never owned, the only brand as a major brand, that would be a John Deere. I never really got into the John Deere line. We have some at work where I work, and the nice machines, nothing against them, but I just personally never owned one.
I'm sure he can even call himself a garden tractors, but if that's the case.
Have you owned a John Deere?
Yeah, 214.
Yeah. So yep, that was one of the ones I never had. I had Cub Cadet, Boland's, I had Moto Mo's, I had a Bush Hog. I did have an original, the Cub Cadet I did have was an original Model 70. Actually, no, I think it predated the 70. It was the Cub Cadet original. There was no number designation to that tractor. Fun hobby. It can cost you a few bucks. A lot of times you end up buying a tractor because it's one attachment that you want and they won't pot it out, so you end up coming home with a tractor and a bunch of pieces and parts you don't need for one particular attachment. So luckily for me, I'm pretty handy. I can fix just about anything. I'll get whatever running, keep whatever I need, and sell off the rest and put it towards a future project.
So how many tractors would you guess that you've owned over the years?
I would say probably around 30.
30?
Yeah, give or take.
What's the most you've had at one time?
Oh boy, probably a dozen in various stages of disrepair. Yeah. Again, it would be I would buy probably just a parts tractor just to get some pieces and parts off it to put on one of my running tractors.
Your favorite brand is?
Right now, I'd have to stick with the Simplicity Alice Chalmers lines. So mainly Simplicity, and only reason being you can still get a lot of parts for those machines. You can actually use them, every day. I mean, not every day, but every week if you wanted to mow. I mean, I wouldn't want to use them every day, but no, you can still get mower spindles, blades, Things where some of these other machines, they might be half the age, you can't even get parts for it anymore because they just don't make them, they're not available. So,
Any tractors that you got that you really were impressed by or that you kind of were shocked about?
I'll tell you, the Boland's Husky line, for what it was an extremely heavy duty tractor for the time. They were powered by Wisconsin engines. Those are really good motors. But the only problem with them is it's kind of like owning engines. They were awesome in their time, you know, but to get parts from these days, it's getting harder and harder. Whereas the cast iron Briggs, they're good motors, and you can still get a lot of parts for those machines. I would say I like Wheelhorses too. I think Wheelhorses always made a pretty good tractor. They were powered, a lot of them were powered by single cylinder Kohler K series. Some of the fancier models were powered by Onan, which again were good motors at the time, but they're just getting harder and harder, as you well know. They're just getting harder and harder, more and more expensive to get parts for, if you can get them at all.
All right, Jim, so what do we got here?
This is a Gravely Model L. I don't have the exact year and date. The model tag has been missing. This is actually a put together of a lot of different parts. It's got the these high wheels on it that I've never actually seen on a Gravely before in my life. I've been to a lot of shows and conventions. I would put it at probably, I would say probably late 40s, early 50s. The handlebars are not original to the machine. This is dated even earlier than that. These are something I picked up because the other ones were broken and welded. So I threw those on there. I did have it running once upon a time, but it's not currently running right now. It'd probably take a little bit of doing to get it going. These actually air-cooled engine, single cylinder. They do have it's a filtered oil system with pressurized. So this would be an oil filter canister right here. And it builds up oil pressure similar to like an automobile. These things were kind of ahead of their time. Gravely kind of helped, you know, corner the market on their walk behind tractors. These were really big before like World War II. And it became even more popular after World War II. And that's when you started seeing the evolution of the four-wheel tractors. The garden tractors come into play as well after post-war, because during World War II, as you well know, I mean, you had war effort, so a lot of these manufacturing companies shut down production. They worked on government contracts for the United States for building military machinery and so forth.
All right, Jim, so what do we got here?
All right, this is a 1961 Simplicity Model W. I bought this machine up in the northern part of the state. I bought it for $100. And the only reason why I bought this machine is because of the attachment that's on that machine right over there. So when I bought this machine, like I said, I bought it for the attachment that was on it, the saw rig. And this machine was basically sitting on a pallet, seized up solid, not even running. So I figured it was too good of a machine to waste. So I ended up putting a little bit of time and effort into it, and I got it unseized. And actually I got it running pretty decent. It burns a little oil, it smokes a little bit, but all in all, it's a pretty solid rig, and it's just a piece of history, so I figured it'd be worth doing something with. Yeah, like I said, it's a 61, so this would probably be one of the early models of the Model W, and it would be the successor of the V series, which we're gonna get to pretty soon. I ended up getting the trailer and sulky out of Connecticut. I've actually had that before I got this, and that would be a factory attachment as well.
Now this one burns a little bit of oil. You got that camera going right
Yep.
Yeah, she burns a little oil, but she runs. She's a good starter. Yeah, she's gonna make a liar out of me now. Actually, you know what? I always shut the gas off. First you don't succeed, try again. Yeah, she is. Yeah, push a little bit of smoke. Like I said, this one was seized when I first got it. I had to free it off from all the mystery oil. But like a good old trick,
this is a newer version thereof of the Model W. This would be one of their, this would be probably right before they ceased production on the Model Ws. I believe this is a 1968 Model W. And what's unique about these Model Ws, which I like about them, they actually utilize the same transmission that the garden tractors of the era use also. The only difference is they don't have a brake band. They don't have like a brake per se built into the transmission like the ride-on tractors do. So again, this one's a 68. It's got the 3-speed transmission. This rototiller attachment actually came off a 4-wheel tractor. I did a little bit of fiddling around and they fit identical. So I had to do a couple changes, did a little bit of modification, changed the pulleys around, but the pulley drive off the 4-wheel tractors matches up with the 2-wheel tractors, and it's a compatible unit. So I actually use this to till my garden this year, and it works really well. They definitely don't build them like they used to. Next up, we have this Simplicity Model VB. This would be the predecessor to the W lines. This tractor right here, I believe, is a 1957. Original motor, original transmission. This was the saw rig I was speaking of earlier. This is the one that went on that W over there. But they're compatible. The attachment series is the Quick Hitch series. If you look over and get close to the tractor on the side of the transmission, you'll see where it says Quick Hitch. That was one of their patented selling points. And the compatibility goes across the line of tractors. This is a fully functional unit. Nothing was seized. I had to take it all apart, re-grease it, clean it, take all the, this is a centrifugal clutch right here. So once the engine hits a certain RPM, that will kick in and we'll cut wood. Years ago, when chainsaws were like big and bulky or not even really around, you would cut your wood with a buck saw or what have you, and you'd cut in 4-foot lengths and you would process it with this. And what I really like about these units right here, back then, you didn't have like all the regulations and guidelines on the, for what these machines, for what you can sell, you know. Back then you had to have common sense. If you had common sense, you could run this tractor and not get hurt. Nowadays it'd be festooned with guards and all kinds of paraphernalia to kind of safety switches. There is no safety switches on any of these tractors. That didn't come about until about 1968 to about, actually I'm sorry, probably about 1970 I think they started going with the operator present switches on the tractors, because I had a 1970 Simplicity Sovereign, and that did have very, very rudimentary safety switch setup, but it did have one. Yeah, this tractor is a 1967 Simplicity 2012. This would be the last of the round hood. And when I say round hood, that usually distinguishes because the hood itself has kind of a slope off each side. And typically the model breakdowns with these tractors are always done mid-year. So this would be like probably late 66, early 67, I think. And I believe that's where this one falls into. The motor's not original to the tractor. I actually transplanted this motor in it from another tractor I had. The original motor, I bought this tractor with a blown connecting rod. The motor was blown, and when it detonated, it did a lot of damage, so it wasn't really even rebuildable. So I found a good donor engine, put that in there. So it's definitely an all numbers match tractor, but the motor isn't original. This is a 3-speed transmission. Like I said earlier, same 3 speeds the Model Ws have. Flip up the hood here, so to speak. The configuration is the same as the 3-speed that's used in the Model Ws, but the only difference is they do have that brake band so they can break the machine, whereas the Model Ws, that's just casted right off and it's just a solid piece. This tractor in particular has a 4,000 watt generator on the back of it. That's a belt driven unit that runs off the mid PTO. It's not a factory original unit. This one was put out by Generac. They actually made a bunch of these for different tractors. I believe John Deere, Cub Cadet, and this one was retrofitted for Simplicity / Alice Chalmers of that vintage. It works right off the 3-point hitch. I actually have it just like I said, belt driven right off the mid PTO, and it does work. I actually powered my house with it a couple times last summer. We lost power for small storms, and it works really well. You know, you wouldn't want to run your dryer and stuff off there, or your oven in your range, but it'll keep the lights going and the fans running if you need to. This right here is a 1966 Alice Chalmers B10. Some call it the BBEE because of the Bumblebee logo on the side. This is considered to be a late model. They did have an earlier model B10. Those tractors were only, I think, rated at like 9 horsepower. Then they came out with the Big 10 in 1965-66. That was basically the direct predecessor to this model right here. This would be the last of this model before they went over to the flat-hooded garden tractors, the B110s, 210s, and so forth. But yeah, this is a B10. It's got a mid-mount grader blade on there. Those are kind of a rare attachment you don't see many of.
So who made who?
So it's kind of funny because Simplicity Manufacturing started out first, and they made Simplicity line. Their first entries into the garden tractor market were the walk-behinds. Then they started making the Simplicity Model 700. I believe that was like in 1957. That got superseded by the 725. The 700, that stood for 7 horsepower. The 725 was 7.25 horsepower. They had a model, it was a 9 horsepower model. I don't know if they had like it was the Landlord. It was 1964. Then they had the Simplicity 101, the Simplicity 2010. This would be the bigger brother thereof. And then they went to then started getting to the flat-hooded tractors, the Sovereigns. They still had the Landlords. But by about 1972, they started kind of breaking up the shift a little bit. So back to the original. So Simplicity made the tractors originally. Alice Chalmers contracted Simplicity to make their line. I actually have an early model B1. We'll take a look at that later. It's in shambles right now, but it's one of my projects I got on the back burner. That would be one of the OG original Simplicity built Alice tractors.
So this one doesn't look quite like the others. What's the story with this?
No, this is a prime example of companies being bought out by bigger companies. International Harvester was the original maker of the Cub Cadet. I believe they started in 1961. They went up into probably early 1980s, 81, maybe 82. They sold out to MTD, and MTD bought the Cub Cadet name basically, and they actually produced a couple of they carried on their lineage for several years with the shaft-driven tractors, and probably up until about the 90s, maybe mid-90s, and then they started kind of just downplaying them all, and this would be a typical box store, belt-driven Cub Cadet. Basically, the only thing it shares with the earlier ones is the name. Yeah, this is the project tractor I was talking about earlier. I ended up buying this, probably 8 years ago, down out of Rhode Island. And I actually bought it for an attachment. That's kind of how it goes with these machines. You end up buying one tractor for an attachment or whatever it comes with, you know. So I can't even actually remember, it's been so long, I can't remember what attachment it was. But again, I got the tractor. It belonged to an older gentleman. He had since passed away. His grandson, unfortunately, kind of got into the tractor and took the motor apart, but didn't really know what he was doing, so he kind of made a heck of a mess doing so. I actually have the original motor in the cellar. It's going to need a full rebuild, I'm sure. and all new gaskets and so forth. But yeah, this is definitely one of my project tractors I want to get going, and it's a 1961 Alice Chalmers B1. So this would be Alice Chalmers' entry into the four-wheel garden tractor market. The rest, they say, is history.